May 1st, 6:30, we will call the Planning Commission to order. First item of business is the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. All right, roll call. So we have to take roll call, verbalize who's in attendance, so let's just say our names and go from there. Peter DeMuth.
Darren Brown.
Jeff Sargent.
Paul Crossland.
All right. And we'll go from there. All right, roll of Planning Commission. I won't read it, but it's on the agenda. Next item is approval of the agenda. Any changes or corrections to the agenda? All right.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll second.
We have a motion from Brown and a second from Crossland. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0. Next item, consent agenda. We have Planning Commission minutes from April 3rd.
Mr. Chair, if I can know, there's a couple of misspellings that I'd like to correct.
Okay.
If you'd like me to say what they are, but otherwise we'll just note it and we'll just make it.
I think grammar and spelling corrections are okay.
Just curious, this was was this the first AI generated
Yes.
meeting minutes? So how did that work out for staff? Is it met expectations, or what did you think?
I've not talked, Hayden's nodding his head. so,
Our-
yeah.
Our administrative assistant in the office, Kelly Thielen, has said that it's worked out really well. Just obviously the realize on the review miss a couple spelling errors, but she said that it's been working really well.
Great, good to hear.
So that's part of why it's important to introduce yourself at the beginning of the meeting.
Does it recognize our voices like
I believe so. Yeah.
after that?
Scary.
I'll make a motion to approve the planning commission minutes.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. A motion from Brown and a second from Crossland to approve the minutes from April 3rd. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passes 4-0. Next item is open forum. Open forum is limited to 3 minutes for non-agenda items. Is there anyone here for open forum? All right, with that, I guess we'll move on to item 7, council update.
Okay, for April 8th, we had our end of the year financial closeout. The freeway interchange came in, I think after everything was said and done, $500K over budget. Then we had a Three Rivers Park engagement plan. There was some concern a couple meetings back that we really wanted an idea of what their plan was for all the properties they're buying up along the river. And this is kind of a start of getting an understanding of what's going on, what their plans are. We had a park improvement bid award. There were a lot of alternates in it. Pretty much all of Stevens was an alternate. And we ended up pulling those alternates, but the rest of the bids went through. I think there was some tree plantings that we pulled out of the other ones too. But that was that. TCM Farms, there was a lot of discussion on roundabout 114th. It passed with some caveats, 3-2. that roundabout on 114th gets figured out, because as of, and you guys are aware of this, there's been nothing done as far as that goes, so it's kind of a significant caveat. 113th water extension, that was to go out for design on the 113th, on the west side of Territorial up to 117th. That passed 5-0. Water trail, there was an approval to go out for bid on the bulk of that. So there was the kayak launch. There was a lot of other pieces to it. That was approved 5-0. And then we had a closed session for performance, the yearly performance review on the city administrator on the 22nd. We got the moratorium that you had recommended. That went through 5-0. There was a lot of discussion on making it 3-month or 6-month. It finally went out at 6-month. There was also some discussion about the scope, but it ended up, I think, pretty much is what you guys had seen is what we approved. And then there was some discussion about the Stevens Park alternates that we had passed the meeting before, or that we had withheld. There was some discussion on how we were going to fulfill some of those things. There was also a larger discussion on doing something with the amphitheater, putting some sort of shelter over this, at least the stage. That was put on hold until we get the update on the overall design done, or at least that part of the design. And then there was a small discussion on conduit debt, which was new to us. I don't know if you want details on that, feel free to ask Zach. But it boils down to certain groups can get bonds through the city. They get a better bond rate, and the city doesn't have any liability, and it's an odd deal, but apparently it's very common now. Legacy Woods preliminary plat was approved. I think there was some adjustments to the Greenway overlay. That passed 5-0. There was a short discussion on an easement problem on a kind of a three-way easement on Lawndale. So that ended up getting tabled until we can get more information. Parkway Neighborhood Phase 2 preliminary plat was approved. 5-0. The South Diamond mill and overlay the bid was accepted, 5-0. Then the property, there was so there's been some discussion on the EDA purchasing a property on the freeway, just off the freeway interchange. They had some negotiation with the county, but this was to transfer the property, see if I get this right, transfer the property back to the county so that we could then get it sold. Yeah. So,
Buy it from the county. Yeah.
yeah, it was one of these ping pong things, but yeah, so that was it. Any questions?
Do you want to cover this?
I seen it.
Do you want to mention anything on it?
Not really.
Okay.
I mean, are you gonna cover it at all? It looks like Nick has resigned from the planning commission, so we will be opening up a slot. It's unfortunate because I think he was a good asset to that, but
Yep.
family comes first, so.
Yep. All right. Any other questions or for the council?
Just a general question. I don't think it's going to factor in tonight with the discussion on the concept plan, but with the greenway overlay on Legacy Woods, I believe, did you guys make it like bigger, smaller, anything
Smaller.
important to?
I think we limited it to the wetlands.
Yeah, well,
And
it
then-
was the same recommendation that the plan commission
Was it?
had.
Okay.
Got it. All right, perfect.
It was the same, I think, the same elevation, and we
Okay.
did keep that strip to keep them connected.
All right.
All right.
Oh, we did delete the strip around Lower
Round
Lake. And I don't remember if you guys had recommended that, but
I don't
Talking
remember
about it.
talking about Lower Lake.
yeah, you might not have. There was a, what was it, 20 feet or something? So
Yeah.
we just nuked that.
All right. Moving on, item 8, public hearings, 8A. Concept review plan for unsewered single-family residential development.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Commission. Tonight you're asked to review a concept plan for, as the chair mentioned, a single-family unsewered residential development in the northwest portion of Dayton. It's east of Brockton Lane North, south of Dayton River Road, and west of Lawndale Lane. The overall site is 117.5 acres, and if you include the easement areas previously dedicated to Brockton Lane North and Dayton River Road, the site is roughly 119.5 acres. Property is currently zoned A2 and A1. This would require rezoning to the A3 zoning district. The entire site is guided low-density residential for sewer development, and currently it is within the post-2050 MUSA staging area. The concept proposes 12 total lots, single-family, including 11 new and 1 existing that would be replatted with this development. The total area proposed to be developed with this plat is roughly 19% of the entire property area. All new lots proposed are 1.5 acres of net acreage, oriented all in the northwest area of the project. It includes connection point to Brockton Lane North. Hennepin County has review authority over all preliminary plats that are adjacent to their county roads, so they will provide, at the time of preliminary plat review, provide a comment letter for the Planning Commission and City Council to have in their packets. Also includes outlots adjacent to the well site for a potential future well treatment location. I'll just make a note on that. The Public Works and Engineer staff did review that size for a well treatment area. They said that proposed 0.71 acres would be of sufficient space for it. There's just a view of the overall site looking south. This area really is the where the 11 new lots are proposed currently. Here's just a breakdown of the A3 district requirements. All lots, with the exception of Lot 5, Block 2, meet the minimum standards. The minimum lot width at the setback of this property is 137 feet, so that would be something we would look to have revised at the time of the preliminary package submittal. The impervious surface requirements in the A3 district is 30%. That's obviously at this point undefined, as that is kind of a continuation review when lots get developed. Some considerations to note, the A3 district does require a 2 per 20 acre standard for lots. The concept is proposing 12 total single-family residential lots, which would require 120 acres in total for the plat boundary. Currently, the boundary consists of that 117.5 or 119.5, depending on how you view those easements along the property lines adjacent to those county roads. Based on what was approved for the A3 district standards, this would not warrant 12 lots, given the current acreage of the property. There are some mechanisms that could be reviewed by the Planning Commission and the City Council to otherwise allow 12 lots rather than 11. A couple of those include, there are unplatted well sites that are adjacent to this property that were previously a part of these properties. They could essentially become part of the plat boundary if the city were to consent to that. That would be an option. Another option would essentially be proposing a text amendment to discuss the rounding option of acreage when there is a decimal to the total property boundary. That could be something that we could look at as part of the preliminary plat review. There's also an opportunity for the applicant to apply for a variance as long as there are findings of fact for a variance. And I will just note that when it comes to preliminary plats, you're kind of starting from scratch, and it makes it very hard to warrant a variance. And the other alternative is to require them to only limit this to 11 lots. So that could be a discussion point as I go through, and feel free to stop or interject if you have any comments or questions related to these. This existing single-family home on the site is expected to remain long-term, and the concept shows this lot getting platted as a landlocked 4-acre parcel that would not have street frontage. Now, the subdivision code does require that all new lots, all platted lots in town have street frontage. There was a sketch in your packet that showed a conceptual outline of how that could be accomplished out to Dayton River Road. Another option would be for the applicant to apply for a variance related to the existing easement that's in place. That would probably be a little bit easier to tackle in staff's opinion, just based on the long-term planning for this area. If they didn't want to bring the property lines out to Dayton River Road to grant them access, using the existing easement that's in place for the existing driveway, and granting a variance as part of the preliminary plat would be something that the Planning Commission and City Council could consider. So just wanted to note that as well. Streets, the proposed concept shows the road ending at the north property line adjacent to Maria Avenue right-of-way. The new road will be designed to meet city standards at 60-foot right-of-way with allowing for future sidewalk or roadside trail to be added at a later date if wanted. Staff does recommend that because you're bringing the proposed concept brings the road to the edge of Maria Avenue right-of-way at the north. Staff does recommend that Maria Avenue be extended to the south to connect to that street. And staff will obviously be looking for feedback from the Planning Commission and City Council on that recommendation. I will just note that that is not an out of the ordinary request when it comes to developments and new roads getting connected into existing systems. Staff also recommends that right-of-way be dedicated, at least dedicated on the east side of the proposed street, between two of the lots extending to the east, to plan for a future road connection and the eventual extension of Shady View North. That type of roadway extension would likely be incorporated into a future development that would happen at the time of sewer being available in this area. I might not have mentioned it prior, but because they are orienting the lots up in the northwest and they're not utilizing the whole area of the plat acreage is what warrants the 11, 12 lots within this area. So the remaining lots, or the remaining area of the plat, would essentially be not developable until that sewer and water is extended to the area. I did mention about the sidewalks. There's no sidewalks planned on the new street, being that if sidewalks were installed at this point, they would not connect anywhere as there's no trail along Brockton Lane yet. Sidewalks, staff recommended that sidewalks would not be necessary at this point in time. And just one note on the street light, staff doesn't feel the need for street lights within the roadway itself, but at least on the Brockton Lane intersection, there be a Cobra light or something like that to light up that T that would be there. The wetland staff is recommending that the wetland and upland buffer area that would be established for the wetland be platted as a separate outlot for the city to own. One of the main reasons is that this helps protect the wetlands in its existing condition by not splitting it between the buildable lots, creating confusion for property owners that are not aware of what can be and what can't be done within the wetlands, and also avoids any future issues related to unwarranted work or disturbance within the wetlands by private property owners. Wetland buffer signs would be placed at the buffer boundary essentially acting as the property line. The comprehensive plan, the comprehensive trail plan does show a future roadside trail along Brockton Lane North and Dayton River Road. If the Hennepin County letter does not require enough right-of-way at this point when it comes to platting this property to install a 10-foot roadside trail in the future, staff would look to have a 20-foot easement along both roadways. The extent of the plat boundary, of course, be established. Again, that is only necessary if Hennepin County doesn't require adequate right-of-way to have that go in there. And then just a note, the landscape buffer along at least the buildable lots that would be platted on Brockton Lane North, there is a requirement in the zoning ordinance for a 35-foot landscape buffer, and that would be expected to adhere to the minimum requirements for that. And then general site landscaping would also be a requirement at the time of development, and a landscape plan would be something that we would see at the time of preliminary plat. The Planning Commission and City Council are asked to provide feedback on this concept plan. All comments are non-binding, but are able to be incorporated into the preliminary plat package that would be submitted in the future. The City Council is anticipated to review this concept at their May 13th meeting. They would, the two applications, they'd have to they'd be required to apply for a preliminary plat and rezoning. The applicant has also approached staff about a future site for an event center within this plat. An interim use permit would be required for that, which will also be reviewed by the Planning Commission and City Council at that time. If the applicant chooses, that request could be reviewed concurrently with the preliminary plat of this property. And because we've had conversations with the property owner prior to this concept coming before you, staff would recommend that that area for the event center be platted as a lot and block rather than creating it as an outlot, which would essentially make it not buildable. So then they would have to come back for a replat if that were to get approved. So with that, I'll open it up for any questions for staff.
Your last question, Hayden, or comment regarding the event center, just so I'm clear on it in my brain, is if the applicant wants it to be a lot, that means that they've identified the area then, right? So it'd be good if we're approving a plat or preliminary plat that we obviously have gotten through that concept plan before we say, yeah, it's a lot versus outlot.
Sure. Yeah, I don't disagree with that. The other alternative, actually it's not really an alternative because that acreage is a part of this plat boundary. At least the area that, a general area for that lot and block would be something that the preliminary plat could incorporate or should incorporate. And certainly at the time of preliminary plat submittal, we can work with the applicant to see where they're at in their process for the IUP review, potentially bringing that all concurrent to the Planning Commission and City Council.
Sure. I can add, the farmland has buildings now, or existing buildings, so typically with an outlot, you'd have no buildings at all, it would just be farmland.
So with the A3, we're allotting, units per acre, right? And we're already saying we're 1 unit over what's allowed based on the calculation. It's still allowed to have a outlot with an event center beyond that?
Because it's not a residential home.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And additionally, these event centers are allowed by the zoning ordinance in residential districts on an interim basis. So,
If you platted the whole lot, or if you platted the whole outlot as a lot, it could still be unbuildable.
yeah, by conditions of the preliminary plat, you could.
You don't have to call it an outlot. I just don't want it to trigger certain fees either, maybe. I don't know if that's the case, but 'cause I know in subdivisions that triggers a lot of fees. I don't know if that's the case here, but I mean, to me, as long as it's clearly identified and we can track it, whether you call it an outlot or a lot doesn't really matter to me. As long as everyone knows that, all the density's been allocated somewhere else until the sewer pipe gets here.
Yeah, I think, just looking into the future, at the time of the preliminary plat being submitted, I think one of the conditions at the very least for that lot specifically would be that that could not have a single-family home on it. So that would be something that we would call out with the resolution for the preliminary plat.
The other question I had, and I guess I'll just leave it as a comment since the question would probably be more directed at Jason. But obviously, if they come in here when we get to the preliminary plat phase, I just want to have the city engineer confirm that we're not inhibiting orderly development in the future, either with the sewer pipe, the water pipe. I see that the sanitary sewer runs east of here, the main pipe somewhere it's going to run. And so I guess the question is how is the properties potentially on the west side of Brockton going to be serviced? Like, is there the sewer line going to run through this road that we eventually, that becomes part of this development? Just want to confirm that everything makes sense and like there's no requirements for lift stations or other development costs that normally would be incurred by development that the city might have to pick the tab up in 20, 30 years.
Sure.
Just high level reviewing the west side of Brockton, at least on the south side, is picked up by a force main.
Talk to me. I'm not.
Force main
Right
lift
over
station,
there, the
yeah,
purple?
yep, the purple. The east side is gravity fed with the green to a lift station south of here on the east side.
So the little blob up here in northwest Dayton, what you're saying
Yep.
is that would all be fed
It
into there?
could all be fed into there if they do a smaller non-septic type.
Yeah, and I was just even looking at the elevations too.
Yep.
It actually drops as you move to the east, so
Yep.
there could even be the gravity fed if it came down.
So it could
that
be
street.
gravity fed to that. It's labeled 19 in the comprehensive plan.
Okay.
And it's sized as an 8-inch force main. That's going to be a huge force main for that small area.
Just to be clear in the driveway before the applicant come up here is, so what you're saying is that there's instead of, I guess I'm not a fan of the plat the way it is because you're creating a potential of 20 or 30 years from now, there's two different property owners involved, for all we know. I mean, that's not their intentions, but there could be if you plat it. And that could prevent orderly development. I'm a bigger fan of leaving it as an easement and have language in the easement that essentially says when the remaining land is platted, that easement is distinguished as long as the plat provides public right-of-way to that 4-acre parcel. I mean, I understand the code. This is just a unique property, I guess, where I think the variance would be justified for having just leaving it as an easement and adding some language to the easement that it's automatically distinguished when the outlot's platted, as long as there's public right-of-way coming to it.
Yeah, certainly, and I think along with that, just as we talked about the preliminary plat resolution, a variance resolution in this regard could direct an amended easement agreement between the property owners at this point to make sure that that language is protecting the landlocked parcel.
Okay.
Any other questions for staff? All right, would the applicant like to come forward?
Well, I can,
I think we might have a few questions for you.
Yeah, no problem. You
Uh,
want me to-
Name and address and
Jack Bernens. My address is actually 14770 Thicket Lane. And my son's house is the one you guys were just discussing, which is 17921 Dayton River Road. Yeah, I mean, we have been working on this a while. When the A3 district came available, we, were looking to see if we could do a couple things. One, kind of go with the city's vision of having larger lots that weren't all just Lennar, 8 houses per acre lots, as well as our bigger goal is the event center, the vineyard, and the winery. And so we thought we could do a real service to the city, if you will, by developing part of that. That obviously proceeds helps us build the event center as well. And then the other, roughly 75 acres would remain either in corn and beans or in vines. We have 10 acres of vines right now. And our plan is to probably go up to 30 or more, but we'll just take ground as we expand. It's a, event center, wine tasting room, winery, and vineyard. Like some you've seen around the state, there's not really any up in this area. I've been operating one at my place since 2011, and we've been making wine, and it's kind of a venture we want to take on. As far as the development itself, I guess we're open to. We drew the street from Brockton to Marie, or at least up that way. Whether we connect to Marie or not was more city staff's recommendation. If it make more sense to go over and connect to Shady View or something like that, it would be more expensive for us, but certainly willing to look at that as part of the preliminary plat. We have a few concerns on things that have been recommended by the staff, but I think we can probably discuss those as we move toward preliminary plat, unless you guys, want to discuss those tonight.
I guess I'd be curious on what those conversations were. I mean, this is going to be one of the steps you have to take with the planning commission anyway, so we might as well know what those concerns are so we can work those into future discussions.
Yeah. Well, I only had just a few, like most of the stuff that's being recommended, like the landscaping, berm, the trail, easement for a trail, all of that, I think we're generally pretty okay with. I just gotta find my notes here. So there were just a few things. The 11 versus 12 lots. Our understanding is that the gross acres is what you go by, which is 119.5. And if you take the two wells that are on our property, it used to be 120.25, I think, something like that. They're like, each of those is like a quarter to a half acre. So we would ask to consider the 12 versus 11, being my son's being the 12th, it would still be 11. If we did take the road over more toward Shady View, that would probably increase the size of the remaining lots, because that would add probably 2 or 3 acres, maybe 4 acres to what's currently drawn. The other thing that wasn't mentioned, but it's proposed that there'll be full park fees, because there's a potential park, I think, up kind of where the water tower is maybe being planned to be, up where, that's not on our land, it's on the church's land. But our feeling is, well, if that park ever happens, it's going to be 20 plus years down the road. So, it's kind of a theoretical, and we don't even know what the park fees are, but it doesn't seem like it makes a lot of sense, considering the park may never happen, and if it does happen, it could be 20 plus years out. The only other thing was really just the wetland ownership. We're continuing to farm this ground. There's 75 acres that we'll continue to farm, and I don't know where, if we're just talking about the pond behind my son's house, but it doesn't seem like it would make sense for us to, and I assume we're gifting the property to the city. I don't know how that works, but there's probably at least 7 or 8 acres there at $20,000 an acre, was a lot of money for us to just donate to the city, because they feel like they could take better care of it than us. We're more than willing to move the property lines on the homes. So like if the proposed homes need to not have any part of the park or pond, and we move that back to the wetland buffer, and then the rest of the pond is just owned by the outlot, which is the rest of the acres. Or we could obviously extend my son's lot to cover the whole pond. But that one's a little concerning to us just from a freedom to farm perspective. And I mean, we're trying to operate and we don't need to be going to the city every time we got to do something to ask them, you know, can we farm this ground? Or because you know how it can get. You get people in there and then they're like, well, you can't farm here. Well, it's been tiled for 40 years. So, you know, what do we, you just tell the farmers, okay, we can't farm that. We're just going to put it in grass or something, you know. Now, we didn't put any of the tile in, but there's a lot of tile that's been put in this farm over the years, so to make it farmable. So those are really the only major things that we have any concerns about. And like I said, we'd be more than willing to discuss those through the preliminary plat process or however you guys want to do it.
So I guess question for the city on the park dedication fees. That's calculated based on the 11 or 12 lots.
Based on residential units.
Yep. So it's a relatively small number at this point.
It's roughly $7,800 a lot between the park and trail dedication, and as per the subdivision requirements, that is a requirement for all new lots.
Yep.
And usually is paid prior to the release of the final plat.
And then that goes into a fund to fund all parks, not necessarily one per.
Well, so the city's policy is, if I remember correctly, 75% of that fee is going to stay within the neighborhood.
Yep. And
25% is a citywide project. So in this case, 75% of Jack's case would go in a fund for a future park in this area that might be 20 years from now.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
But it's for general maintenance and upkeep and the
Not
park
for
dedication
maintenance.
fees.
But
This
it
is
could be-
specific for like equipment. and new
Improvements and all that?
facilities,
Okay.
For replacement of facilities, but not maintenance.
And it could be used if there was let's just say I mean, either of these have, Brockton or Dayton River Road have potential for trails that this fund could be used for.
It
Potentially.
could. Also, McNeil Park is in
Yep.
this area,
Yep.
so it could be used for upgrades to McNeil
Just-
Park.
Thinking about purposes of that.
Yeah, and just to be clear, to make sure everyone's got the right understanding, so we're asking you guys to pay for park dedication fees on 11 or 12 lots, not to give up any land for a future park or any fees for a future park on your property.
Yeah,
Is that
no,
correct, John?
that's what I understood. I was just, from what we understand and what the church's plans are, whether those ever come to fruition or not, is that, the likelihood, our understanding was the reason the park fees are assessed is because there's a park that's planned within the geography of the area. And that's at least the way we read the document. And so we were saying, like if we pay, that's still, $100,000 that we're going to have to pay for a park that may never exist.
I think the answer is the park fees are paid by everybody when a lot gets platted.
Okay.
And not just in that area. Is that,
That is correct,
Correct.
and that's also the same for simple subdivisions. When an existing lot does a lot split, park and trail dedication fees are required as well for that in an existing developed neighborhood.
And Mr. Chair, just for clarity, it's when we're talking about the church property, it's the property that's adjacent to
Yep.
the south that's owned by a Holy Spirit Academy. So versus St. John's Church, which is up the road.
one question I have, Jack, is regarding the whole driveway easement. Because I'm assuming that you control that easement, meaning
We do.
you're the benefit, you have both sides of it.
Yeah.
Are you open to the suggestion that I talked about earlier about not platting that and just keeping it in the easement with adding some language that basically says that it's extinguished when the owner of the lot that the easement goes over goes to plat it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So it'd just be, kind of remain the way it is now, meaning
Yeah.
the easement would be there. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I would support that too. Makes the most sense. I think Darren hit it on the head as far as what kind of makes sense with this property. Yeah, it might be a little bit more work or it might be a variance that's required, but I think it is one that's justifiable. And again, it's a common sense type of approach that I think we should take as a city as far as how we control that property or how it's controlled in the future for future development.
From a concept perspective, I would prefer Shady View. I should say, is it Shady View? Did I say get it right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would prefer the connection to Shady View for a couple of reasons. I think one is that you're getting the road closer to the future development to the east, so you're gonna have to give up less land for a future road to begin with. And I think it allows you to maximize more lots along the pond, which I think are gonna be a premium, even if you shifted the road a little bit further to the west if you can. The other big thing, and then I don't know until someone like Peter might be able to help out here, but, you know, when that sewer main comes through, it's just, everything's gonna line up better, I feel like. And even like when you go to Ghost Plat, there's a natural pinch point between that wetland and Dayton River Road that we can see right here, is that you really don't, it's 500 feet, so if you put a 60-foot road in, you're talking 220-foot lot depths. We can probably end the Ghost Platting at that pinch point if you go to there, as long as you're understanding how those lots along Dayton River Road, making sure that road lines up so that eventually everything works out right. But again, at 220 feet, that's about the standard lot depth. Well, you can get smaller, I guess, but. So my suggestion is that I get it, the lots are gonna get a little bit bigger, and, you know, when we get into our discussion on 11 versus 12 lots, maybe that helps this decision too.
Yeah, understood. Yeah. I mean, it would, I think, the way it's drawn today versus what you're suggesting would probably add.
It's gonna add some more
That's
roads.
like 4 acres, 3-4 more acres.
Yeah, you're gonna lose some land. You know, I don't have
But
the,
I agree with you that, I mean, we've always seen that kind of from the wetland, you can see the drainage toward
yeah,
Dayton River Road, and
It's a low,
it's a low spot, and, you know, at best, you're probably gonna take that road extension if and when it ever happens down across that wetland, but there's not gonna be houses built down in that low area.
So-
Because it's just, you know, I don't think it'd be suitable, is my guess. I mean, maybe part of someone's yard, but,
it's amazing what they do to land if it's not marked,
yeah.
not labeled wetland.
Yeah, true.
So I somewhat agree with you on connecting to Shady View. Where I'm stuck at is looking at the neighborhood just to the north of you, and I know it's not your problem, but if we were able to connect to both Maria and Shady View, we could actually dead end Johnson Street and eliminate what I would call a worse connection point on Brockton. It's just an older connection. It's not as, you know, it's coming up to the curve where we stop. You know, the what would be, I guess, Maria Avenue in your development, you know, is going to be a nicer, newer connection, more modern, and it'll be safer.
Where it connects to Brockton, or
Where you connect to Brockton.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. You'd take out where Marie connects to Brockton
On the north side,
North
it's
side,
called
okay.
Johnson Street on the map, but
yeah.
And connect, you know, not, this is more, I don't know that I'd put this on the developer. This is more city connectivity and city comments of, you know, what does the roadway network look through both our existing homes that are there plus the new development. I think there's some potential there. I think there's some thought that needs to go into that. You know, the well house is certainly, you know, it's there, and, you know, if you look at the drawing you have, it's with your plat, you know, maybe there is room to put a roadway. It's 100-foot wide at that well house. Is there room to sneak a roadway east-west there on the north side of what would
Where
be
the
your,
current access is,
yeah,
the gravel?
yeah, what would be your lot 7, right? Is there room to put a roadway in there? That's where I'm in my head thinking.
But are you talking about back to Brockton then, on the
No,
west side?
it's lot 7, block 2, if you're looking at the packet.
There's not space for a 60-foot right-of-way.
That's what I'm saying, is there a way we can get 60 feet there in that and shift some of these other lots down? Maybe it comes into how just things are laid out.
Right.
Or you go to reduce the lot and make the remaining ones a little wider after you put the road through.
Yeah. That's where my head is in looking at connectivity overall.
Would that put another, we didn't even think about that because we figured the access to the well would be removed and then there would only be one access on Brockton. But because we were the understanding like the county's not going to like another.
So my thought is more
Closing an access.
is closing an access for the city's standpoint up on, in the future when your outlot develops and basically putting an east-west road on the north side of lot 7. And I know, John, you said there's not room, but that's a
There's a
question.
chance to,
I mean,
if the plat shifts like this.
lot 7 is,
Lot 7 block.
yeah.
You want to put a road right against the back of all the current houses.
What,
And right next to the what current well?
it'd be on the south side of the current well.
Yeah, be along this property line here.
And then you're still keeping Maria open but dead ending it at Johnson.
That, and trust me, I'm thinking big picture here of the county wants us to limit access on county roads. This provides an opportunity to do that on 2 points where, it starts to get tight between Brockton and River Road.
Oh, I understand.
Yep.
I'm just that house right there by that well. So not only are you taking my front yard for more, putting Maria through, you're putting another road right on the other side.
And
You're basically
We're-
going
We
through all
gotta
the
wait, we gotta wait until you
hold
come
on,
up.
we'll have a public hearing in a minute. The thought though is not necessarily to put the road in, it's to preserve an easement for a road. There's no reason to put a road adjacent to lot 7 east-west in today's conditions. It's the easement for, or a right-of-way for the road.
What would be the issue with, instead of saying, you're talking about closing off Johnson, just basically moving that access to where it is now at the wellhead? Or not the wellhead, but
On this development,
Number one.
move the access down to where the development is, and then
Yeah.
you have to come in there to get up to the wellhead and then close to Johnson. I think that's.
Certainly.
what he was saying.
You certainly could do that. Mine was pushing it further south to where Maria is shown here.
Where the wellhead, or the well's coming.
No, just this access here would be
Oh,
the
yeah,
only
yeah,
access.
yeah, you were saying the same thing, Peter.
Is there a wellhead down there?
No,
Okay. You're saying, I
the
think.
well house.
Yeah, so,
Yeah, right there's the well
yep.
house. Hayden, can you pull up like the Hennepin County GIS or Google Maps? You know, as I'm looking at this, one thing that everyone should be conscious of is, I like the idea of going in the Shady View better, but I also realize Shady View and Dayton River Road has got issues. And not, and so it just doesn't align right. And so, I'd be curious to see if Peter, you see how it kind of jocks to
Yeah.
the left, but, is that roundabout material in 15 years, 20 years? Or
it has
30?
wide open sightlines. But yeah, you're right, it is at a, like
It's a
a
weird-
60
I'm-
degree.
But it's also 30 miles an hour.
I'm
that
dealing
one,
with,
too.
I'm dealing with County Road 81 and 42nd Avenue in Robbinsdale right now with this exact same alignment from 90 years ago. What I would propose, because this is, if we're planning a residential in here, I would propose that Shady View get cut off at Dayton River Road and and I know I can't project what I have drawn up on here, but we tee into Dayton River Road south of, at a right angle south of that triangle parcel.
So in that scenario, if that ended up being the road, dumping this new road into Shady View would be kind of worthless.
Yeah.
Although Shady View could turn into this, then you close off the north access and
Yeah.
connect
Is your-
on the south
is your
side,
goal
get a
to-
90-degree intersection.
Close the Shady View access to River Road?
The South Shady View, yeah.
South Shady View meaning
South of
River
River
Road.
Road.
As traffic gets more and more and more, that will be very tough intersection.
Yeah.
But we're quite a few years away, but
Something like that.
it's more thinking of where do we want the right road coming up from your development.
Well, I was just wondering if you did want the road to come up and connect to Shady View, from Shady View in, they could all essentially come out to that Brockton, the new Brockton exit, couldn't they? Or, where it's drawn on the plat where you have it going to Brockton, you come in and then you'd be able to go all the way up at Shady View dead end, but they'd have to go through the neighborhood to get out. The new neighborhood,
Yeah.
so to speak. Just a thought. I don't care.
Yeah, I
either
think
way. We're trying to
understanding
just-
this, and I don't have a good picture, and I'd like the engineers and Peter to think some more about it, but I think it has a big deal on, if you dump that road in the Shady View, we could be, which I think it's better for a design concept for this project, but I don't want to create an issue in the long term
Yeah.
either.
Yeah, my idea in my head would be to take, I'll call this the Johnson Triangle, the whole neighborhood here, take all of this neighborhood and close off. In my thought, at least, would be, we'd have to study this some more, but it would be to close off these streets to Dayton River Road and Brockton and funnel them out. Essentially, your property to much safer connections at where we can have it at a right angle to Dayton River Road and a right angle to Brockton. And so to get in and out, you'd go south of the neighborhood to get out and then back in to go.
So I understand where on Brockton, kind of maybe where it's proposed. Where would it be on River Road, you think?
Where it's proposed, I have no idea.
Down on Brockton, it would be down.
Yeah.
Brockton, it would be what you have drawn.
Right.
On River Road,
Somewhere,
somewhere.
maybe even close to where the driveway is.
I don't know if I'd go that far south.
Once that's developed. you mean
Once
that
that's
road
developed,
comes
yes.
up,
This is,
okay.
this is talking, once you develop 2050 plans, kind of starting to think about what this looks like. And this is part of, I think, one of the challenges we knew we were going to face with these. So that's why we're having the conversation here about the A3.
Well, yeah, I mean, you could stub it and then have it long-term connect to where his driveway is and then out, or reroute it to have it come out further down River Road. I mean, we go out through the well access just to not have another entrance onto the road.
Yeah.
Or my son does, I should say. And we had that conversation with the city and said, yeah, sure, we can use your well exit versus putting in a new one.
There's a lot of elevation issues on that site.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Chair, are you suggesting with the ghost plat of showing where a future intersection would be with Dayton River Road?
I would say it's worth maybe showing on the ghost plating. It's ghost plating, so it doesn't have to be stuck there, right?
Right.
But it's showing that we are recognizing that there is an access to Dayton River Road that, eventually somehow that driveway then connects to as well. And, some of these things that I think we have concern over of us from the city, so.
And if Johnson Street gets closed at Brockton and Shady View gets closed at Dayton River Road, then we need to have connections to both Maria and Shady View to give those homes
Yeah.
future access.
Yep.
Yeah, and we'd be responsible for the connection to Marie up to the property line, basically.
I think you would,
One or the other, like if you did both of them, there's probably, this is my opinion, there's not the need to construct both of them today.
Oh, just put an easement.
Right, you gotta construct one of them so you have continuity and connectivity, but
Yeah.
that's my opinion anyway. But you need to have the land dedicated so it can be constructed in the future.
Yeah, okay.
It seems to be a big question to figure out.
Yep.
To make sure we don't mess it up.
I guess I'll just note for the commission as well is that if the preliminary plat comes in and the road is proposed to end where Maria Avenue right-of-way ends on the north portion of this property, staff would offer two solutions for the city council to consider in the planning commission as well, and that's one is just dedicating the area and making sure that that right-of-way remains so that connection could be made in the future. The alternative would be that at the time of them installing this proposed street for the new development, the applicant could construct the extension of Maria off-site off of this project, and the city could credit back the cost for those improvements. Those would be kind of the two things if the preliminary plat proposed that Maria alignment.
All right. Any other questions for the applicant at this point? All right, thank you. We might call you back up, but
Yeah, no problem.
this is a public hearing, so we will open the public hearing at 7:26. Anyone who would like to come forward and
Hello.
My name is Bruce Graffunder. I live at 15720 Brockton Lane, just north of the Bernens property. And it sounds like they have a lot of good ideas for the event center, and it all sounds very interesting. The only concern we have in our neighborhood is Maria Street, although it's platted, it doesn't really exist between our house and 15720 Maria Street. It's basically Jeff and Sue Johnson's driveway, and our concern is that it will ruin their property because basically their deck will be right on the road if that road got punched through there. So we're thinking there's got to be a smarter way of, connecting that development. And perhaps, I know there was some discussion that existing well pump road, there may be room there. There's already a driveway there. There's already, access to Brockton there. That could be an option, I would think. But I don't know. It's our opinion that the worst option would be to extend Maria through the neighborhood there. There's families on the north side of Johnson Street there that have kids that are playing there, and it just seems like routing it through that, corner and back out to Brockton just doesn't seem like a good idea. So that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you.
I'll just make a note too for the people that are attending online. If you do wish to speak during the public hearing portion of this, feel free to use the raise your hand function.
Question for staff, do we know how long ago this area was platted north of the subject property?
Right, look at the mayor for the history.
About 1 million years ago.
A million years ago.
For what it's worth,
Original
Jeff,
plat.
a lot of the houses are built in the late 70s
Right.
and mid-80s.
I mean, my only point in that is that, obviously, rights of way are platted at the time they're platted with future development in mind, right? And when you're platting property that many years ago, 50 plus years ago, with the idea that it could be potentially built in the near future or in the distant future, obviously a lot changes between then and what would be today. So I completely understand the concern of the neighbors as far as actually improving that right-of-way, whereas in the last 50 years, essentially, it has never been a right-of-way. It's been maybe a glorified driveway in some instances along Maria, going south from Johnson. With that said, I mean, it is platted right-of-way, right? So the city will have some big decisions to make on whether or not they want to use that platted right-of-way for the purposes of improving street connections for the betterment of the city. So this might be a tough one. Listening to the ideas from the other commissioners here, they sound great. I think that this plat in front of us, or the concept plat, might be a little bit too preliminary at this point because of these new ideas that are coming forward. But certainly that's something that the city's going to have to look at pretty closely as far as what is the intended development idea for this whole area, and not just this new development that's coming, and how is it going to tie to that Triangle Johnson Street neighborhood as the chair indicated. I could see both sides very easily as far as concerns that neighbors have, and the usability and flow and safety of the new development that's going to potentially happen here.
These lines, I think I don't know when it was done, but you'll even see down in the backwaters, Mississippi, you've got easements, or you've got, platted roads. So,
well, if you look at the aerial, I know it's not 100% as far as accuracy, but you could see there's actual development from a property onto one of these platted easements, right? Yeah. So that's one of those, it's like, well, it's probably been there forever, and it's just that's how that development happened. Perhaps it was there before it got platted. Who knows, right? So obviously there is some planning that happened 40, 50, 60 years ago, and that not necessarily should drive what the future platting should be in the area.
Yeah, both Johnson and Maria were just simply driveways. And then when the sewer came through, enough of them was paved to get to whatever houses were there. Like Johnson Street could have gone all the way across, but
You're welcome to come forward. Name and address.
Sue Johnson, and I live on 15720 Maria Avenue. To Dennis's point, when we bought our home in '97, Maria was a non-maintained city road. So it was gravel. City water and sewer came through whatever that they widened it, and now it's, 30 feet? So that speaks to why people feel it's a driveway and everything. My husband did ask at that time, before city water, if we could have it given to, how do you take it, what's the word?
Vacated.
Vacated, yep.
Yes, and we were told no. So it's not like we haven't tried. I'm not opposed to the development at all. I'm just concerned that our end of our property is going to be 15 feet from that road. Sorry. Anyway, I'm done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Mary Graffender, and I live at 15720 Brockton Lane. And I just want to take the opportunity to point out a couple things on the aerial view, because I'm sure you're probably not familiar, although Mr. Fisher is probably familiar with the area. But Johnson Street here is already dead-ended. And Maria is less than a block. So if you hooked up here, people would come here, and then they'd have to turn here and get out on Brockton there. So it's a very short piece of road that is not going to be ideal for access for people to get from this new neighborhood out onto Brockton. You need to come up with a better solution than squeezing it in on this little Maria. Maybe you do need something east and west here that's wider. if you look at the actual size of that property, I don't think that it's feasible to squeeze a road in there. And I just want to make sure that you are familiar with that neighborhood. It is kind of a goofy triangle. And maybe this is a time to get something improvement there. But I don't think putting that access on Maria is the way to do it. So.
How is access onto either Brockton or Dayton River Road for the people who live in that area? Is it hard?
It's not a problem, no,
is
because
it
they
safe?
just
Is it-
improved that intersection. They put a little traffic island so people can get across.
When you say that, when you're referring to Brockton and Dayton River Road?
That's right, yeah. They just improved that last year.
You still have do you still see cars back up to Brockton, up to Johnson? No, you used to, on
It's
occasion.
better since they improved 101. Typically, it only happens on like Labor Day weekend, Memorial weekend,
Okay.
or if there's a bad accident tying up traffic on 101, they will divert and come on to Brockton. But that's improved a great deal since the upgrades on 101.
So, I think one of the things, just because we've had, frankly, we've had other concept plans come through in DCM Farms, right, impacting longtime residents of Dayton. So I'm glad you guys are here during the concept plan so we can have some of these discussions early on. One of the things that I'm trying to do, or with what I've drawn up, I know I can't share it, but one of the things I'm trying to do with, or show with the connection of Maria to the new development is actually to provide, it's not to provide the new development access to Brockton through your guys' neighborhood, it's to provide your guys' neighborhood a better connection south. There would be no reason people would go.
Safer.
Yeah, safer. There would,
And not so much today, but
It's-
like
it's
in 20, 30 years.
20, 30
when
years
traffic
when-
on Brockton is even more.
Yep. And that's what one of the struggles we're running into in a lot of these older areas that were just grid platted that didn't consider what the future holds.
And how, I think I recognize that how this triangle gets accessed through this development is very, very important. Not so much today, but for the future. And that's why we got to give a lot of thought, whether it's Maria, Shady View, both. Because it'd be good to know what the other
Yep.
alternatives are too, because we just talked about one plan, but, you know, no one likes this, but another plan is you take out one house and you can better connect stuff now. But, you know, no one wants their house taken out, and that's not happening today, by no means, but that's other options too, like the house on Shady View, the one bigger lot. When that intersection gets redone, if that got taken out, you could take Shady View up and bend it over into Johnson, and then it's a self-contained neighborhood. And maybe you leave the access point on Brockton, because I'm assuming that's going to be less worse in the future than the access point on Dayton River Road.
The access point on Brockton currently only services just the residents of those homes. It's not a busy road.
Right. And it's
And-
more so when Brockton gets really busy, like if you guys are turning in, do we need a turn lane, which will help, but
Yeah.
we just don't want anyone rear-ended, you know, turning in.
Yeah, that would
When
be
you get
unfortunate.
15,000 car, or hopefully it's not that many.
Yeah.
And there's a roundabout, I think they're looking at 20, 29.
On Shady View?
12 and 13, Brockton and Dayton.
At the intersection.
Intersection, yeah.
Intersection.
I mean, do we know what our long-term plan is with the Shady View, Dayton River? I think that'd be a good thing on staff's, is to think about what is the long-term plan with the county with that intersection. I think that's a tricky intersection.
It is.
Yeah.
And we need to understand it so we make sure that access through this development provides access to these homes.
I'm sure that Hennepin County would prefer to close those intersections and have the existing homes go through the new neighborhood.
Okay.
I see we do have one person online.
Jeff, let us know if, feel free to speak. I think I've unmuted your mic.
Let's get Jeff online first and then.
You're good.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Hi, Jeff Johnson, 15720 Maria Avenue. So basically Murray Avenue is, like my wife said, is our driveway right now. And to the platting piece of it, one that was platted probably 40, 50 years ago, I don't know if 60-foot width was what the city usually looked for their streets. So perhaps it was, platted or extended as maybe like a 33 or 40-foot easement or something. I'm not sure. But to my wife's point and to my neighbor Bruce, thanks for speaking up for us, Bruce, is it literally, if you go 60 feet wide there, we'll be able to hand people coffee as they drive by our patio, and they're waiting out or whatever. And so I would ask that the commission maybe go and look at the area. I like the idea of going out Shady View. Sorry, Larry, I'm not trying to put more traffic on your street, but it's already really wide, and it wouldn't, there'd be no more disruption to that street than is already there. So there's no additional houses that would be affected or anything else like that. So I do like that proposal. It's a good consideration. I understand your discussion about shutting down Johnson and Maria down there. We don't have a problem, except like Mary said, when there's a bad accident on 101, or you get a holiday or something, and people think they're being smart and getting around traffic. But that's really the only time we don't have any problems. And I do understand your thoughts about future development and everything else that might drive more traffic there. So I guess I'm just asking, actually rather than look at maps, take a drive, look at the properties, and maybe you do. I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but look at the properties, see how everything lays out, and then make a decision. But I really do think that that pushing Maria through is kind of it's going to be really tough. As well as, you're probably aware, is the main sewer and water runs right down that street right now. So coming from the well house, I don't know if that affects anything or not, but that's where the mains go. So anyways, thanks for listening to me, and I look forward to seeing how this develops. Again, I'm not against the development at all. I mean, that's fine. I just think the routing of traffic is going to be probably the key point for us, and hope you keep that in consideration. So thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Philip Frederick. I live at 17881 Dayton River Road. My property is right next to the well as the Bernens come out of their property out on Dayton River Road there. And it was mentioned earlier that the elevation is something to be considered, if you're going to be going out to Dayton River Road. Because right now, as I sit in my driveway on the motorcycle pulling out of my garage, I cannot see a fire truck coming from the left, coming up that road. That's how much of an elevation there is. And I just want everybody to take a look at that, drive up and down the roads there. And if you want, come sit in my driveway and we'll sit down and talk for a while, and you'll be able to see that I have no vision either direction. Once I commit to pulling out onto the road, I'm at the mercy of who's ever driving too fast. That's about all I've got to say. Just drive out there and see what's going on, and elevation is a big concern of mine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, gentlemen.
Well,
My name is Nancy Hanowski. I am on the board at Holy Spirit Academy, and I just had a question, maybe echoing Mr. Bernens' concern, or a question about the fee, the park allocation fee. I'm just wondering if this is a equal opportunity fee for the whole city of Dayton development, and how long it's been around, and who gets to pay it.
do you want to talk about the park dedication
I
fee?
couldn't tell you how long it's been around, but it's paid by all new residential development.
Okay.
So
But you don't know for how long?
Yeah, it's also,
It's decades.
it's not anything that's unique to Dayton.
city of Dayton.
Every single city has a
Even
park.
outside the seven
Dayton.
county core have them.
It's just kind of a sticker
It's-
shock when you're,
Yeah, I mean, it's really, for new developments, it's really in lieu of not being able to provide park space for new residents on the property being developed. So if you do incorporate a park in the area that you're developing as part of the plan, then some of those park dedication fees can be extinguished. It's when you're not planning on that, you have to plan for the future use of green space for the new families coming in that are living in that development. And so that's why that park dedication fee is established to help improve other parks in the area or set aside for a future park in the immediate vicinity.
so the offset, if you will, if you have green space, is something you guys consider? No.
Not for park.
No. So the way it's written in Minnesota statutes, the first option is to dedicate land. And if the city determines that's not appropriate, then the second option is to pay a dedication fee
Dedicate land for public use, you're
for
saying?
a park.
For a park
In
specifically.
lieu of paying fees.
In lieu of
Right.
paying the fees.
So for
So something
the-
like a vineyard or event center wouldn't qualify?
No.
I mean, it's public
So they're
use.
not,
Unless it's a
just so
public-
we're- just so
public
we're really clear
vineyard.
here, they're not gonna be paying, or the formula that you use
Yeah.
is different for different uses and how
Okay.
you calculate park dedication fees.
Okay.
And so like for homes, we've been talking about what the fees were per home. If you have a different use, a vineyard or a school, it's a different
It's
calculation.
based on the acreage rather
Yeah.
than
And-
residential units.
Yeah.
Sure, so just fair warning, we're looking, we are able, per our deed specifications, we can sell off part of the land to help fund building the school. So we're looking at doing a similar thing to what Mr. Bernens is asking, so that's my question. Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Mr. Chair, we do have another hand raised.
Sure.
Here we go. I think we can hear you now.
Hello?
Yep.
Oh, so this is Marcia Grover, you know me. I just have a question on how this A3 works, because it looks like Mr. Bernens has maybe 120 acres, but it is in 3 separate parcels. And all of these houses are going to be put on one parcel. So I don't know how that works. Could you explain that a little bit with this A3? I just can't figure that out.
Sure.
Thanks.
Thank you. Marcia, just for minutes, if you could repeat your address, please.
Oh, it's 11320 from Brooklyn.
Okay, thank you. So currently, it's 3 parcels, and let's say Bernens is able to subdivide into 12 residential lots. There would be a 13th lot that is for the farm, and it cannot have a house on there. So it'd be going from 3 lots to 13.
So if you have 3 parcels of land that are,
Contiguous.
say, in A3, and you put all the houses on one parcel, then what happens to the other 2 parcels?
So the intention is that the density is 1 home per 10 acres.
So the remaining area wouldn't be allowed to be developed until that sewer and water becomes available.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, another way to say it, Marcia, is that whatever you start with, it doesn't really matter how many parcels you are because they're replatting it. And so as part of their replat, they're combining all 3 parcels and then separate them out into 12 lots and an outlot.
Okay, so they're going to end up combining all 3 into one big one?
And then they separate it out in the platting process.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you so much.
Any other public hearing comments? All right, with that, we will close the public hearing at 7:49. Any other comments or thoughts from the commission? It's a concept plan, so we don't need to give directions.
Yeah, I think the one thing that we haven't talked about is we all need to state a little bit of opinion on this 11 versus 12 lots, so the applicant has clear direction as far as the planning commission. I don't know if we want to tackle these, but that's one of them. I think the wetland versus DU, we need to have a discussion on. Wetland is all lots too. And it's hard with the concept plan itself because I don't feel confident that we have the road connections options understood. I want to make sure I understand those options.
So,
It would help if we had some drawings for everyone to understand the options, if the applicant even could just sketch out different options. And it's not just about their property, so this is where staff is involved. It's about the options for what happens in that triangle for connectivity, in particular if one of those curb cuts eventually gets closed, such as the Shady View onto Dayton River Road.
so I think what
Yeah, this is a sketch I did and sent to staff. My thought is you do the primary S-curve road connecting from Brockton on the south at the entry of the new proposed development, and then you kind of cut it through lot 6. And then you combine lot 7, which is the one we talked about, which abuts the north end of the property, into one larger lot, so we lose that lot that we're talking about, and then connect into the Shady View as part of the day 1 connection, and then future day 2 connections you could close off Shady View and put that leg off to the east connecting to Dayton Road through the undeveloped part of the land, and then leave an easement connecting to Maria. So in 20 years that connection could be made and close off Johnson, but it doesn't mean it has to. Johnson and Maria could still function as their own thing. You just have that easement that cuts through. You still need to provide access to that northeast or northwest lot, but Shady View is just an easier connection at this point. It's a little longer road for the developer, but it's less impactful on the existing neighborhood, and I think long term it provides a better connection for the neighborhood.
I see your concept, Paul, and I generally agree with the idea. Hayden, I just sent you an email, just if you could maybe throw that image up there, just so the applicant can see it. I would agree with everything you said about the Maria being an easement for future, not anything that's built today. The hard thing I'm having is that the way the road, I don't think it's a good idea to have the road. Obviously, it can smooth out when they replat it. But I'm debating, if the applicant's okay with it, I wouldn't mind seeing his plat get extended. And so the connections like that, and then how you connect the Dayton River Road is the next question, which serves the bigger development area when it gets developed too, versus shoving it all the way up in the corner. So it's a very similar concept.
Same idea, yeah,
Yep.
just different.
And I guess the biggest thing I wanted to show is that, like the way you drew it, it's going to probably be tougher. Like the plat's going to have to get bigger because of the road to meet all the lot sizes, is my guess.
Yeah, and this is also not considering grades and.
Right. Correct. And I purposely dead-ended.
Yeah.
And so even with the road to the north of Shady View, they don't even need to build that road. They can just put that in easement. So the 2 easements are going up to Maria Avenue, or right-of-way dedication, whatever it is. And then the other one would be where, you turn up. And then plus when the city snowplows come through, we don't have dead-end roads because that's not a good thing for public works.
So you essentially cul-de-sac it at this point?
There wouldn't be a need. It would be a straight
have
shot.
the extension from Bernens development to Maria or Shady View at this point.
You would have the one to Shady View.
Oh, you'd have Shady
You
View.
wouldn't have the Shady View to the east. You just
Shady
have
View
the
to the
dedicate,
east.
because it's not going anywhere.
Okay.
Yeah, so you're proposing connect to Shady View day 1.
Day 1.
Yeah. So then it's.
And I'm open to the idea because there's a lot going
Which
on.
way does it zigzag through?
Yeah.
I think these are good ideas and maybe good opportunities for the developer here to take back to his team. It's really hard for us to sit here with MS Paint and start designing this for him, right? So I think at least he understands kind of what we're thinking about as far as that connectivity from that property to the north into this newly developed property to the south here. But perhaps that's just something we should put on the developer to say, kind of kick this around see what you could come up with, come back to the planning commission when you have something more concrete?
I think from a concept though, I mean, this is concept plan and these are the types of
For sure.
feedbacks. You know, when we start talking 11, 12 lots, this type of connection or providing these connections makes it more appealing to allow more lots. You know, putting some thought into an area that frankly, I mean, even in the initial concept I was struggling with that north corner up where Shady View and the new road are, struggling with how that gets developed without, you know, without putting pen to paper.
Right, it's an odd shaped piece of property at some point, you know, once these properties get chopped up like this, you inevitably gonna come up with a weird shaped lot somewhere, right?
I think one of the things this one does that I didn't think about initially, but I did hear some comments from the neighborhood, you know, this one, assuming all the homes would be frontage to the new road, this one puts backyards to adjacent properties, you know, versus a roadway or something else. So definitely some fine tuning that can be done with this. Yeah.
Yeah,
You can come back up.
It's more for clarity
Yeah.
than anything, because there've been a lot of ideas kind of bounced around here. So on this particular rendering, you're saying like we go here to Shady View and then just stub like here, and then that could be a lot, this could be a lot.
Correct.
Kind of thing. And then future, maybe that comes up somewhere here or this way or whatever. I mean, we don't have to figure that out now, right? That's what you're
You just got to keep in mind that
And then this would just be an easement?
for future right of way, you know.
And it
Well,
may,
this right now is an outlot for the city, so we might need to bring this road this way more to not waste too much between here and the outlot. I don't know if there's enough for a lot there or not. I'm not an engineer, you know the.
yeah.
Yeah, you can move the road.
Architect,
Yeah,
whoever.
don't look at that road as like that's exactly where it needs to be. Those are fat lines on paper with, I think it's more about the connectivity
Yeah.
than it is the,
These sketches are just so you
Yeah.
can visually see what we're talking, as opposed to
Yeah.
us just pointing and saying, you know, from 50 feet
No,
away.
I mean, what we're trying to figure out is, I have a preliminary estimate just on the road, it's like $700,000, so I don't know how much more that's gonna add to go over to Shady View, but I might be able to get, the staff probably won't wanna hear this, but, you know, if we had 13 or 14 lots, it might make it a lot more financially feasible. Now, I know it doesn't gel with the A3.
we got to get the 12 first.
Yeah. Well, 12 would be wonderful. I'm just trying to figure out, you know, like, you know, does that add another $300,000-$400,000 for a road, or I don't know. I have no idea.
Yeah, I think when you come back, that's something that we need to hear, but
So, when you say come back, do we do that in, I'm not a developer, so I'm not familiar with the process. We're working with someone that'll probably build the road and the homes. Does that mean come back another version of the concept plan, or can we move to preliminary plat and just make the changes for preliminary plat?
People have done it both ways,
Yeah.
to be honest.
I would say, I mean, you can go either way and bring back a concept.
I mean, I could put together a concept for a different concept for the May 13th meeting for the council, and then use that to go to preliminary plat,
Yeah.
if that would.
Yep. Yep.
Does that work?
Yeah, and I
Because
think-
I have enough time to get the architect or whatever, or the survey, you know, the
That's-
engineering company to draw it.
Typically, that's how a lot of developers do it, is they get our feedback on a concept. You know, we agree, I think we're all in agreement that the road needs to be thought about through here for connectivity purposes, for future proofing it. And
Okay.
that's the one thing that we're, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's good feedback. I'm just trying to get
On-
clarity on how to move forward, and, because I think I could get this redone somewhat along these lines by the May 13th, and then, you know, see what the council's feedback is, and then go to the preliminary plat from that.
So, I was going to say, just for clarity, the concept plan would go to the council on May 27th.
Oh, okay. For
So-
some reason, I thought it was the 13th.
Well, if it was going to be the same one, I'm sure that we had an extra week in April, so we would be able to push those items that the planning
Okay.
commission would see here
That's
on
the only
May
reason I was
13th.
saying the 13th.
We would need the revised drawing by Tuesday.
Next
To
Tuesday?
meet the
Next
13th,
Tuesday?
The 6th.
The 6th, yeah,
if you want it to be at the 13th meeting.
Or you can go to the
27th.
27th.
I'd push for the
Okay.
27th.
Well, let me see what I can do.
Yeah.
It's probably not.
Well, it's
my
really your
schedule
guy you're
first.
working with, what he can do.
Yeah, I know, exactly.
Well, I think a consideration should be made on this 11 versus 12 then too.
Yes, we have to talk about
Because
that.
that's going to certainly drive what your architect or whoever's putting the stuff together is going to be able to come up with as well. My initial thoughts on that is that a half an acre is pretty darn close. You know, when you're talking 120 acres and you're off by a half an acre, to not be able to get in a 12th, which is probably going to be needed financially to help make this thing work, I would lean more towards what kind of mechanisms the city could put in place that would make the most sense to allow that 12th, especially if you're within that half acre or an acre.
So generally, there's three options. So option one is an ordinance amendment where you're defining how close is close enough. Option two would be a variance, and option three is to go through the title search to show where, actually that might be tied to the variance. What is the history of I'll call it the parent property? Did the parent property include the well property, where you could say, okay, it used to be over 120 acres, it meets the intent of the code?
I'm leaning strongly towards the variance route, assuming that the applicant can provide access to that north triangle, and that's the justification for it.
But
The only reason I don't want to get into the minutia of a half acre is we could have the next one come in at 19 and a half, the next one come in at 39, and I just don't want to, if it makes sense, like here, that's why I'd lean towards the variance myself, because of the justification to solve the problem with access to the north.
Aren't these, this is a PUD, right? Will be?
At this point, it's not anticipated that the PUD route would be necessary.
Okay. Is that what?
It's another
Sure.
option, but probably not necessary.
But even if we did a PUD, I think that the justification of not following the 1/10 is because of what the applicant's doing, giving up land to connect to the north. That
Sure.
is a little atypical.
And I'll just add to the mayor's point, so the code requires that if there's a greenway overlay district that's included on the property, it does require conservation PUD. In this case, the greenway overlay goes along the tree line on the north property line. I think not entirely, no, again, it's a fat line on a big map. The intent there is to preserve the trees along the north property line, probably much of which is going to be outside the plat boundary.
What trees?
The tree line on the north property, isn't that the neighbors?
Mostly the neighbor's trees. Looks like.
More than likely.
Yeah.
The property line technical kind of goes through the middle of the trees in my
Okay.
backyard.
Yeah.
I mean, I come and take care of them, but I think the property line is a few
Right
feet
through the trees, sure.
So you brought that up just as a possible route to a PUD?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
I would support Darren's
Isn't there
thoughts
already
on
an easement for the
going,
water
staying with
line
12.
Where you're talking about the outlot for the water treatment?
Yes, yep.
There's already an easement there because there's the water.
So the point being, the trees are already protected because the existing easement.
I
So,
never thought of them as my trees, but they probably technically are.
Peter, do you have any thoughts on the 11 versus 12 for the applicant?
I'm in favor of what you were suggesting of variance, if we can, if we can figure out a way to make some connectivity for a future problem that may arise.
Does staff feel confident that they could come up with a justification for a variance legally?
I think one of the things that John had mentioned related to the parent parcel, and if there was title work pulled on that, the wellhead sites were dedicated for the public infrastructure that is served. Feel that we can get there. I mean, that's my personal.
It is, and you know, kind of to your point, we can draft a lot of things, but ultimately it's the planning commission and the council that are making those approvals.
Right, you just don't want to set precedent when you don't have to. You know, the next person along the line is going to say, well, you approved this one kind of willy-nilly, you could prove mine the same way, right? So the other thing to consider is that variances, you know, used to be like really strict, like you have to have a hardship. The reason why there's some kind of imposition on this property that doesn't allow you to develop it or build the same way your neighbor could. Since a couple of years, whatever, 10 years ago, it's kind of shifted more towards like a reasonable use of the land. So is it reasonable use? And there, you know, I think the courts are kind of looking at that first justification of, is it reasonable to allow this variance to occur? And I think when you're within a half an acre, I think that reasonableness does present itself, especially with a brand newly created zoning district as well. So obviously, I would hate to have to go back to pen and paper with a zoning code that we just got done creating for the A3 district, and the variance route would work if staff felt it was appropriate to do that.
It sounds like you got support for 12 from the planning commission anyway.
That's what I'll instruct.
From the planning commission, yep.
The
Council's next.
engineering group to look at connecting the shady view and, well.
The one other thing to give staff feedback on is the wetland ownership outlot versus D&U.
So this is more of a larger policy decision. So in you know, as we get more experience with plats, the direction that staff is going is to recommend that wetlands and wetland buffers be platted as outlots versus be platted through as lot and blocks.
I understand a little bit of, so I'm trying to understand, so I guess platting it as an outlot, in my mind, doesn't stop someone in the public from altering it. It's just now we own it and they altered our stuff.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I'm a little torn on, but I don't know enough history on it. Are other communities doing a lot of it this way? I've seen it done
It's
both
mixed.
ways.
Right. We have both ways in Dayton.
I'm comfortable with the DNU, but I guess I'd want to hear more justification. If, I guess as a city, you know, if it's a DNU, I mean, put this way, if something happens in there, I don't know if, first of all, how much maintenance have we done in wetlands, in outlots?
I think it's minimal.
Minimal,
Yeah.
right, so I don't, and I don't think that it'd be hard to justify that expenditure, but that's maybe a discussion when the council has this conversation, is if you're going, you know, if we're really going to justify expending money to fix wetlands or not.
And it's few and far between, but there are also circumstances in newer developments where the sod company comes in and the wetland buffer signs aren't established yet, and the wetland buffer is to be treated as the wetland is, and they will sod right up to the edge of that wetland, essentially eliminating what the intent of the buffer was originally. Not going to tell you that it happens often, but it has happened. We've dealt with the consequences at a staff level before, and
If they did that in a DNU, they'd have the same issue, though, if the city has the DNU, right?
Well,
We can go back in and say you
the
can't.
city would have an outlot. So the intent there is you're siding up to your property line. Your property line ends at the buffer.
Got it.
So in a neighborhood like mine with, you know, quarter acre lots and, you know, you have multiple homes on these wetlands, and maybe when the parcel to the east develops, I could see going to a city owned on that half, but I think on this half, I think just let it be. That's my opinion.
Well, eventually, if that whole area gets developed into single-family homes or whatever it might be developed into, that wetland's probably going to serve as some kind of treatment for runoff, correct?
They have
You would imagine.
They typically have to pre-treat it before it goes into the wetland.
Right, but so what I'm saying is that you would want, if they're going to use that wetland for calculations for runoff before it gets, after it gets treated, to help maintain drainage throughout that whole development, maybe there's other man-made wetlands too, or whatever it might be. So, but with that, the city probably would want some kind of maintenance agreement anyway on top of that to make sure that it's maintained properly to meet the requirements of the engineering specifications. And then at that point, you would probably want some kind of control over that wetland area to say, okay, well, it's time to go in and make sure it's cleaned out properly. Probably not in this wetland, but
Yeah, it's more so with stormwater ponds. So frequently, when a development goes in, is you'll have a stormwater pond that's next to a wetland.
correct. Yeah. Okay.
And this, just for consideration on this, is that the bank, because I don't own this outright, doesn't care, I will have to pay off the wetland in order to give it to the city, because the bank's not gonna just give it to the city. So I would have, I believe, whatever the value of the land is, times the acres to the bank, just so so that the city can maintain the wetland. I guess I kind of agree with, that when the rest of the land gets developed, whenever that is, then if that's what needs to be done.
We need to, if we wanted to do that when the rest of it gets development, we kind of need to preserve that right now.
Not necessarily.
Well, you could do your half, like you said, but
Yeah.
if you want to do the whole thing, you need to do it now, because otherwise we'd have to buy the DNU from the property owners.
Well, we could still put a DNU on the wetland.
Yeah.
John's talking about city owning the wetland.
Right, as an outlot.
Yeah.
So if we put a DNU on the wetland today and then determined we wanted to be in an outlot in the future, it's basically, you're taking a property right from that property owner now that you might have to pay
But if
them.
we buy it or if we put it in a DNU today, we still have rights to maintain it for its
Correct.
intended
That's
purpose.
that's kind of why I'm leaning that way.
So,
Yes.
and John, I know you said we've had it in both situations. I'm just scanning throughout the city. The areas that are city-owned are adjacent to roadways. The areas that are privately owned there's no roadway access to them. Or a trail access.
Yeah, I'll just say, this is a much bigger policy
Yep.
discussion that needs a lot more time and research in it.
The one thing just to clarify with the wetlands, while the applicant's up here, is when staff requested that the wetlands become outlot, you guys are just talking about this one wetland that we're dealing, not the whole property, correct?
Correct, the wetland in the buffer.
Just this one wetland that these new lots were going to butt to?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, just wanted to make sure Jack was aware of that. They're only talking about this wetland. Okay.
And again, as John had mentioned, this was a policy consideration that we wanted to bring forward at this point. And from the conversation that we had at the planning commission level, I think that it'll be noted at the city council level that you would want to retain a drainage and utility easement over it. And that's what we will move forward with for this concept at this point. So just wanted to note that for Jack.
Okay. So you're thinking of, I didn't know what a DU was, but it's a
Drainage and utility
Utility easement, okay. So, okay. I mean, I don't think if I do an easement, I've gotta do anything
Shouldn't.
with the bank, but.
You shouldn't.
Yeah, you should tell the banks that the wetlands don't count in your credits, so doesn't have any value anyway.
Well, they only look at it as like, this is the land.
Yeah, it's
that
acreage.
you own, and they just divide by, the total acres into what's owned still, but, okay.
Staff has good direction from the considerations that we brought forward tonight from the planning commission. We'll certainly reach out to the applicant in the near future to discuss kind of the next steps and the potential schedule for bringing this to the city council pending a potential revised concept plan, so.
All right, moving on. Item 8B, consideration for a request to rezone 15520 South Diamond Lake Road. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Commission. This is consideration of rezoning 15520 South Diamond Lake Road from A1 to SA in connection, which is the Special Agriculture District, in connection with this property entering into the Metropolitan Agriculture Preserve Program that is authorized by Minnesota statute. The property is currently zoned A1 and is in the 2040 MUSA staging. The property owner back in 2014 actually went into this program prior and filed for expiration out of the program, which occurred in 2022. Now, at that point, when the program expires, the property goes back into A1 zoning because by zoning ordinance, the special ag district is only for properties enrolled within the program. So again, this property was removed out of the program in 2022, and the applicant is requesting that the city council consider a resolution and the planning commission consider recommending this rezoning request to the city council prior to him going through the process of applying and enrolling. City consent to entering into this state program is a requirement as part of that application. So for tracking purposes, as I mentioned, the city of Dayton requires this rezoning, making these properties that are enrolled into this preserve program identifiable on the zoning map. And then, unless initiated by the property owner at the time of a comp plan change, the city or the property owner has the authority to initiate that expiration or removal from the program, which is a minimum 8-year process. Staff recommends approval of this request based on the MUSA staging of this property and the upcoming comp plan amendments or comp plan update that's going to occur that will give the city ample time to evaluate this area as a whole for future development and then consider whether this property could stay within that program or not. With that, I'll answer any questions.
Just so I'm clear, Hayden, when it's in the program, is the only way it can come out is the applicant withdrawing it, or can the city have some control too?
The city does have some control, and that's related to comp plan amendments, specifically for making these the properties itself developable. Because the property is within the 2040 MUSA staging, a comp plan amendment would essentially have to occur before development happen. And given that it's an 8-year program and it's in the 2040,
Yep. So we'd have the ability to take it out.
Yes, by
20, 30, whatever years, if it happens.
Yeah,
still be in
essentially
it.
that comp plan amendment
Okay.
would occur first, and then we would initiate that as a city.
Any other questions for staff? All right, this is a public. What?
No questions.
Oh, this is a public hearing, so I will open the public hearing at 8:18. Anyone online for this one?
There is one person still online. If you'd like to speak during the public hearing portion of this item, feel free to use the raise your hand function. Not seeing anything.
All right, I'll give it a minute, just so we have a recorded minute on record. Any other discussion from?
Seems pretty
Yeah, I
straightforward.
don't have any
No
concerns
harm,
with this.
Yeah.
No.
Made it up yet?
No. All right, at 8:19, I will close the public hearing.
I will make a motion to rezone the property at 15520 South Diamond Lake Road from A1 to SA.
Second.
We have a motion from Brown and a second from Sargent to rezone from S1 to SA. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passes 4-0. All right, item
Fastest thing we've ever
8C.
done.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Commission. This item is a consideration of a zoning ordinance text amendment to solidify exterior lighting regulations within the city. In February, the City Council requested that staff look into an ordinance amendment related to exterior lighting in all districts within the city. Historically, the city has not had exterior lighting standards. The majority of the new developments have been guided by conditions of approval related to those lighting standards on a given site. I will just note that really the only things that address lighting within the community are very broad nuisance items that are very subjective and hard to regulate. This kind of puts it into an equation, or for lack of a better term, and also promotes the city's designation as a dark sky community by adopting an ordinance for exterior lighting in all districts. There was another thing that I wanted to mention. Oh, the only specific things that are regulated by the zoning ordinance for lighting are lighting standards related to outdoor storage areas and exterior or outdoor display areas where they establish foot candle requirements, maximum requirements at the property lines adjacent. Staff has researched common requirements for both single-family residential properties as well as commercial and industrial, and specifically put that into those two categories. Staff is ultimately looking for feedback on the draft ordinance from the Planning Commission and to consider providing a recommendation to the City Council on this item. So I'll get into the details. The two main items related to this, and as I mentioned, the city is considered or designates itself as a dark sky community in the comprehensive plan, that all lighting, with only a few or a couple exceptions, shall be downcasted with a cutoff angle of not to exceed 90 degrees to ensure that light is not projected upwards. And those exceptions include lighting of the American flag on a pole, as well as low wattage architectural lighting. I couldn't get a good example of the low wattage architectural lighting, but if you've ever driven by the Graco site at night, they've got blue lights that kind of show low blue light that goes up the walls on the sides. So that's kind of what we had in mind, and I guess a common exception around other communities that I've researched. The second portion of this is related to limitations of the amount of light allowed to trespass on adjacent properties, which is measured in foot candles. For new developments, this is easy to regulate because they come in for preliminary plat or site plan review. A photometric is generally a standard requirement of that package submittal, so we can understand what the foot candles are with the proposed lighting plan on those properties. For single family residential, John and I actually we were in Golden Valley on, was that last Wednesday or 2 Wednesdays ago, stopped at a professional lighting store and got an understanding of what is a light meter, how can we use that, and where's the best place to get one to measure foot candles. And essentially what they had mentioned to us that there are apps on the phone that can read light and are actually very accurate from the professional people that know more about lights than John and myself. But that would be the mechanism that we would use for measuring light when a concern comes in. So for single-family residential, agriculture properties, and then the civic and institutional uses, light at the property line should not exceed a half-foot candle. And to put this into perspective, because also light, shadows, and things like that don't show up very well on pictures, so that's why you're not seeing any pictures in the presentation or the staff report. But essentially, a 0.1 foot candle or a 0.5 foot candle is if you're at the property line and a light is shining on you, looking over at the other property, it is barely visible that there is a shadow cast on that property. So that is my best example to provide to you for understanding what is a 0.1 foot candle or a 0.5 foot candle. And then as you increase that number of foot candles, that shadow casted is more and more apparent. So for multifamily, commercial and industrial uses and parking lots, light at the property line shall not exceed 1 foot candle. Both of those bullet points are common industry standards that I have seen from the majority of the cities that I did research in. Multifamily, commercial, industrial uses are very common to limit foot candle measurements at the property line. I will just note there was only 3 or 4 communities in the metro area that I found that regulates single-family residential in this regard. But at the same time, there are also dark sky community designations as well. So for those communities that are dark sky, examples that I found for single-family residential was Greenfield and Independence were 2 communities that do have general lighting standards for single-family residential.
Are we proposing it for single family?
That is the way that the ordinance is written, is that the single-family residential will be limited at a 1/2 foot candle, and lights on the property would have to be downcasted, so there's no uplighting. I do want to make the note also is that the ordinance requires that when commercial and industrial are adjacent to single-family residential or agriculture, that light at the property line shouldn't exceed 0.1 foot candles. And the reason for this is that's consistent with what the outdoor storage and the outdoor display limitations are in the current zoning ordinance. But as well as when new developments come in for commercial and industrial that are adjacent to single-family residential and agriculture, it's understood that there is going to be concessions related to nuisance problems, whether that be traffic or noise issues. Single-family residential adjacent to commercial are going to experience more issues related to traffic and noise compared to being adjacent to another single-family residential. As those are harder to regulate, this would be an opportunity for us to at least try and lighten the potential impact on those adjacent properties. So that was kind of the justification for staff's recommendation in that regard.
And it's just also worth noting that the origin of this project is a complaint where one neighbor complained about the other neighbor's floodlight in the agricultural district.
I'm more concerned about the policing or the staffing level if people start complaining about it in subdivisions.
Yep.
But I don't even know how. So, do you have a better example in my brain about this 1 foot? Like, for example, if I'm standing across French Lake, should I be able to see light at Graco? Because I can.
So the visibility of the light is not necessarily the illuminance of the light.
Okay.
You can see the light, but there's not light that is being projected far enough that will end up casting a shadow behind you.
Where you are. Okay.
Right,
All
yep.
right, that helps.
So if I was standing across from French Lake and I could see the Cube's lights on their property, and I put a light meter up to it, it would read 0 foot candles.
Okay.
So the visibility is different and that's, again, going to be another learning curve for residents when this question comes up, is that just because you can see it doesn't mean that there is light trespassing on adjacent properties.
No, I've got a shield on it.
How often does staff get complaints about lighting?
We do not. At least in my experience here.
Very infrequent.
Yeah. And just because we're creating an ordinance doesn't mean that you're going to start getting an influx of complaints about lighting either. The good thing is that you'll have something to back yourself if you do have to respond to a complaint, if it's legitimate. If there's a legitimate complaint and you said, yeah, this is a really bad use of lighting, and there's nothing to back it in the code, you're hamstrung, right? So I commend staff for putting this together, especially since, when Dayton continues to develop, there's going to be that intersection between residential and commercial or residential industrial that's inevitable. And you have to be able to protect that residential side from that commercial or industrial development with, light pollution or whatever it might be. So it's a good step.
Couple of comments. I would generally say no uplighting. The one that first points that you made, we can uplight flags and then like low level architectural lighting. I just say get rid of the low level architectural lighting. I mean, you can get around that with other types of lighting if you want to have feature lighting on buildings or on your house. If we're a dark sky community, let's just not allow uplighting unless it's a flag. And then I think we should also make a distinction. There's a big trend now with newer homes to put permanent lighting around all the eave lines,
My
which
neighbor
could
has
be
that.
considered holiday lighting, which is exempt, which I appreciate that holiday lighting is exempt.
But it doesn't say temporary holiday lighting, it just
It
says
doesn't.
holiday lighting.
Yeah,
So we
so
we
just
should
a
put.
lot of holidays.
Do permanent eve holiday lighting fall under the exemption, or should that be considered part of the kind of permanent lighting of the house? And if there's foot candle readings that go onto your neighbor's property and those things are glowing
Well,
bright white,
I
can.
think if you want to put the permanent eve lighting on your house, you still have to meet minimum code requirements. But then the question is, are you not meeting the upward facing lighting at that point?
I mean, usually that's downward facing because it's tucked under your eave.
Maybe.
Usually.
Sometimes.
Unless
it's
I mean, you
stapled
drive
to
in
the
some
front
new
of it.
neighborhoods and it's very popular. That
Yeah,
these
I
lights
mean,
now.
yes, I have a neighbor who is doing the same thing. Doesn't bother me any, but I don't know if, I'm not above his house either. I don't know if you could see it from, above or, any kind of light casting. It doesn't shed light on anybody else's property either. It's, low level LED lights probably most of
Yeah, I just think
It's like a glow,
Yep.
Yeah,
like the gray.
I think if we're restricting things in residential areas, that could be one of the things that you start getting complaints about.
Well, and it might be hard to enforce, and it's this. I don't know if this is considered a workaround for lack of a better term, but if you have it on an eave that is at a 90 degree, that essentially serves as the cutoff for that lighting. I've never seen this before, so I don't know where the light is installed on the eave.
Typically they're under.
Typically, they're under.
Yeah, it's
under
tucked
the
into
eave.
the corner of the eave
Sure.
usually. So it's usually illuminating down, but there's more of a glow than you would have from just typical house lighting.
But if we look at what's the intent of the ordinance, I mean, it is at the property line.
Mhm.
So I don't know of anyone I've got plenty of neighbors who have these and they're just lighting up the house and not the property lines.
Yeah, just
So,
bringing it up so we can talk about it.
yep.
It's when they get installed, I shouldn't say installed, but hung by the homeowners on the outside. You could give me an example that lights up my whole backyard.
With the upward or with,
Just lights.
yeah.
For those temporary holiday lights, or are they permanent?
And again, this ordinance is open to any changes or amendments the body would like to recommend. So we can certainly look into how does holiday decorations still need to meet the intent of this ordinance, or should it say temporary holiday decorations to make that distinction that these are not permanent fixtures on a house.
I think it should say temporary holiday displays that would not need to meet the foot candle requirements. If you want to go the more permanent downlighting or the underglow lighting at your house, I don't know, under your eaves, I think it would have to meet the intent and specifications of the ordinance at that point for foot candle readings and so on and so forth.
Sure, it's hard to define temporary holiday lights.
Correct.
There's a lot of holidays, and it's not just one day
Right.
out of the year.
I believe my,
Not all holidays
Yeah,
are
I mean-
official holidays, but
Right.
they're still a holiday.
I believe my neighbor's lighting that they use can change the colors of the lights too for the LEDs, so they just change it to whatever the
Green for
holiday's
St.
supposed to
Patty
be
Days,
for what color that you're right, exactly.
Yeah, but if it's a plugged in like wire, that's temporary, even if you leave it up year round. If you're fixing it to your house and it's hardwired and it's controlled, then it's permanent and should abide by your foot candle readings.
Yeah, and it wasn't really necessarily the foot candles when it came to
'Cause that's
considering
decorative
that
lighting
as
then.
yeah, but the more so when you say that you put Christmas lights around or holiday lights around a tree, those individual bulbs are not all downcasted. So that was kind of more the issue that we were like, well, we still want to have, I want to see Christmas lights when I drive down the street, during the season and things like that. So I don't know if it was necessarily a matter of the brightness at the property line, but more so how do we avoid the requirement of downcasting holiday lights?
I don't think you do. I just don't, I think the intent of any kind of lighting standard ordinance is for permanent fixtures on any type of property.
This gets back to Paul's point. Are they permanent or not?
And that's subjective at the point. I mean, if we rarely get any complaints, and if we get a complaint about some holiday lights, we could say, well, we'll be back in 3 months to see if they're still on when it's March 1st. They're supposed to be Christmas lights, so to speak, so.
Yeah, if they're affixed to your house, they're decorative lighting. It's not holiday lighting. You can use them for holidays, but it's a decorative light.
It's a decorative light at that point. Right?
I think it's one of those areas that staff would just have to use discretion at that point to
100%.
make a decision.
If it's attached with a screw, then it's fixed.
Right.
If it's a wire with its clip, then it's temporary.
We can work on the definition. So in looking at, so the exception would be temporary holiday lights, not permanent.
Yeah, well, the more the discussion is, why do we have to call out temporary? Because I feel like we're opening ourselves up. Just call it holiday lights, and if it becomes a problem, we have to change the code anyway.
Sure.
Okay.
That's just my quick thoughts. I mean, I get where Jeff's coming from. It makes complete sense, but we're trying to define what temporary is.
It's growing pains with any new code that we find out that there might be an issue, and we'll bring it back and explain why maybe it needs to be amended in the future if it does.
I mean, I know, so just from my use of the backyard ice rink, I put a floodlight out there, and it's a temporary light that gets mounted in November and taken down in February or March, and we turn it on when we use the rink and turn it off when we don't. I have a shield over it, so I try not to spill lights into the neighbors' yards. It's just one of those flat LEDs. Mine, I have no neighbors behind me directly, but I know of other neighbors in the neighborhood who do rinks, who have the stand-mounted lights, whether they built them their own or they're the garage work lights. So the temporary lighting thing, I think, opens a whole can of worms.
Yep.
I think you get into a nuisance complaint at that point, and let
Yeah.
the police department deal with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so to Peter, like those examples would be in violation of the code.
Well, pending investigation of the.
Yeah, but because they don't have shields.
Because they don't have shields.
They're shining.
Well,
in every
depending on how they have
direction.
them angled too,
Yeah,
right?
yep.
I mean, it's all how it's built, how it's looked at, what it's doing.
I mean, 99% of the codes are only looked at when you get a complaint anyway. And a lot of, I mean, I think that if they're in there, you're obviously trying to appease everybody. And if those types of temporary lights are required to have a shield, then that's when the conversation could be had with that person using that light to say, hey, look, we did get a complaint. It's right here in our code. If you could shield them down more, that'd be appreciated, type of thing.
And it's easy to make a shield for them.
It is. Yeah.
The one I did have, maybe an add or a modification, is we've got the illumination of outdoor sports fields and performance areas. And we have it regulated to games or events, I should say. Well, it does say game or event. But I don't believe we currently light our outdoor ice rinks.
Yep.
So if we wanted to,
This one's got a light that glares into my house.
yeah. So like if we wanted to just add some language in there for outdoor recreational areas, it's just preventing a future outdoor city recreational areas, prevention of a future amendment.
Yeah, I mean, you guys post, I feel like I've seen in the past, there's hours of operation. If the ice rink is open and the lights are on, it shuts off, the light goes off at 10 p.m. or
Yeah,
whatever.
and this says explicitly game or event,
Yeah.
so
It
it's
is, so you're not always gonna have,
you're,
in an event in a hockey rink, sometimes you have someone there, and a couple
Right.
hours go by, and then someone else shows up,
right.
so.
And I'm guessing you're talking about the one over in this area, and just for my understanding, this is where it would be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say that there is an exemption in the code for city-owned lighting.
And existing field lighting.
And existing, yeah.
So another,
Yeah, it wouldn't read any foot candles in my yard, but I could see them glow.
Yep.
Look out my back window. It's brighter than my Christmas lights. Which is not easy to do. But it's all good. I'm okay with it.
And then do the only other one that I can see a tie with the event centers. And do we have any provisions? Do they have to follow this?
yes.
And so just, right, making sure we're checking boxes.
It is a can of worms, yes.
A couple things that I had here too, if I can. Maximum lighting height of 30 feet, and this is kind of dovetailing on the sports fields. Are we going to have any development that might come in that might need to go higher than 30 feet? Are we aware of? Or perhaps,
We have an 80-foot sign that's going up.
right, so,
Most industrial buildings are above 30 feet.
right.
Well, I would say that the ones that I did look at, like Opus and the Cubes, were right at 30 feet, and that goes with their
Their lights were, they weren't on the top of the, near the
their
top of the
wall
parapet?
lights were at 30 feet was what was shown at least on the plans. Now,
Okay.
what's out there now is maybe different than what was originally proposed, and we could certainly take a look at that. But that was one mimicking what I've seen around the other communities for wall lights or parking lot lights, and then additionally, that's consistent with what the parking standards and outdoor display requirements are within the community or within the zoning ordinance.
Are you suggesting, Jeff, that 30-foot limit is like a little arbitrary, like it should be more or less?
No, I just want to make sure that we're not shooting ourselves in the foot if there's a need for anything higher than 30 feet in any application.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that we probably didn't consider was if, say for the church discussion today, if they put in a ball field or something and they needed stadium lights for whatever reason, that could be certainly something to consider. And maybe stadium lights are really the only thing that comes to my mind that would have to exceed that maximum height limit. I can't think of anything else that would require that.
Yeah. I think I'd put an exemption in there for field lighting.
The only other question I had too is on sign lighting, number 9. So are we taking into consideration any kind of like LED reader board signs? The brightness that those would have to be? Do we have any requirements specifically to LED reader board signs as far as the brightness of them?
Yeah, it's the standard language
Okay.
in the sign ordinance, but it's that one's calculated in nits.
Right.
And I believe it's 500 at night and 5,000 during the day.
All right.
And I think that one thing that I've seen too, and that I've always tried to ask when these sign ordinances these sign permits are few and far between at this point, but when there is a reader board, always double checking to see if there is a dimmer capable on the sign. So if it does end up being too bright, there is a mechanism to turn that down to meet the standards. So
The other thing I know, like Holiday Gas Station likes to put like a really bright LED light around the entire sign. It's not a reader board, it's a lighting standard, so obviously that would have to meet our ordinance as well for, it's not really a reader board, but it's a lit freestanding sign that probably wouldn't meet our
Similar
proposed
to
ordinance.
the holiday lights, yeah.
That's what, those holiday lights, I guess, Holiday
Well,
Gas Station. The other thing that I didn't see in the ordinance that we might want to consider is that, sometimes lighting is for the benefit of the public as far as safety and all that. So this code does not show any minimum requirements. So some codes would say, well, you need 5-foot candles on any entrance into a building that's coming in. And again, that's for safety reasons. And would also, some ordinances also require minimum levels for lighting of, public use space for parking lots or whatever it might be. So something else to consider that we could potentially add on to this ordinance are those safety mechanisms anyway for lighting for pedestrian use.
Sure.
I think building code should cover that, especially for entrances and parking
Right,
lots.
should be in the code. I mean,
Well,
you could
yeah,
double in on
actually,
the code.
Minnesota building code
Yeah.
covers that. So I don't know if we have to cover that in our ordinance too. But
Some ordinances double down on it just so they could check that box off while reviewing a photometric plan or whatever it might be. But yeah,
I mean, you could add as simple as C building code
Could.
for, just so that
Yeah.
someone
Minimum
looking at this,
requirements
yeah.
yeah.
and then the only other thing, or I guess I said that a couple times here, but the question was here posed to the Planning Commission on what you should do with existing lighting. Obviously the three examples would be that all lighting in the city of Dayton shall comply with the ordinance regardless of installation date. So you would, proactively go around and say, you, and you now have to conform. Property owners, if you're found to be out of compliance, would have a certain number of years to bring all the exterior lighting into compliance, or all lighting installed prior to the adoption of the ordinance shall become legally non-conforming, shall be brought into compliance with the ordinance upon replacement. I think the easiest way, obviously, is to go with the legal non-conforming route to say this is a new ordinance. Everything that's been established before this date is allowed until that time that it's replaced or upgraded or expanded on.
Yeah.
That's my opinion.
I appreciate the comment, and the other consideration that I had in my head was basically existing lights become non-conforming, and if we do end up receiving a complaint at that time, they would have to correct it. So that was going to be my original kind of recommendation to proceed forward, was it would just follow under our standard nuisance process of passive enforcement.
Or if a property owner comes in to do improvements and tries to get a building permit for whatever, at that point, then they have to bring other things up to code.
Certainly, and I think that just to be proactive as well for new single-family homes in town, that would be something we would share with our builders that build new homes in town, just to say, hey, the city has, pending, obviously, the city council approval, the city adopted an ordinance related to lighting. Just please adhere to this if you have lighting that's going in immediately. I don't know if a photometric plan would be necessary at that point for the building permit application, but can definitely be considered.
This is a public hearing, so I am going to open it at 8:47.
Wait a minute.
For the one person that's online, if you'd like to speak, please use the raise your hand function. Nope.
All right. I will close the public hearing at 8:48.
Just looking for a motion. Do we have a
Do we need a motion, John, or are you just looking for feedback?
No, unless, motion unless you want to table it, and then it's just feedback.
Well, I think there's a little bit of reworking, not a lot, but tweaks to it, so I don't give them a, since it's not an immediate need, do we just table it? And
If we want to see the tweaks, I mean,
Please let us know those tweaks as a group as well.
There's no rush to this, and, as was mentioned, this was based on a neighbor's complaint. I don't think this ordinance necessarily resolves
this
that
was
complaint.
based upon a complaint?
Yeah.
That's just my concern, that if you have one of those neighbors, you're now, I mean, granted, if you're causing an issue because you got too bright of lights, I get it, but there's a lot of circumstances where, you know, it's just one of those things you're better off figuring out with your neighbor versus getting the city involved, but that's just my opinion.
I will note as well, just because that was brought up, when this ordinance was drafted, there was no consideration given to what is existing out there related to the problem that was brought up to city staff. So there was no, we didn't go out and look and see how we can change things on that. This was a broad thought. There was no consideration given to the existing issue that was brought up on that property. So just wanted to note that.
Like even in like residential neighbors, my neighbor moved now, but my neighbor that next to me liked to leave their lights on, exterior lights. They lit up their house all night, 24, all year long. And so like whenever you went to bed, your bedroom was, you got a night light. I'd be happy if they turned it off, but I guess that's where, are we gonna be getting a lot of complaints like that too, or is it, and I don't even know if it's in violation how you read it, you know, but it lights up your whole, you know, your whole bedroom if you're close to it.
Right now, those people, like you, just stay quiet.
Yeah, I told my wife if it really bugged me, we just gotta get a different shade.
Yes. And like I said, I got a neighbor too, it's lit up like a Christmas tree. And I don't know, I'm really torn on this thing, because
The concept of it, I agree with 100%. I just don't wanna create a.
are we setting up for an enforcement nightmare?
I don't, yeah, I mean, again, I'll double down and say that it's a critical ordinance, I think, because of the development that Dayton's seeing, especially when you get that intersection between industrial and residential or commercial and residential. Those buffers are critical to have as far as livability. So I think it's needed. I don't think that this is going to be something that's going to open the floodgates for complaints. I really don't. What it will do is it will give us some credence to try to resolve a problem that someone might have been living with for 10 years and finally got fed up enough because they couldn't get to sleep or whatever it might be, that, you know, something flipped the switch and now I'm going to complain about my neighbor because I don't care anymore, right? It's gotten to me that much. But I think, you know, having an ordinance in place is going to give the ability for the city to react in a way that is fair across the board because it's an ordinance.
One option is you just remove residential requirements and just have commercial industrial requirements, and if they abut residential, you have higher standards, and the residential to residential foot candle stuff, like, maybe that's not necessary. If we're concerned about it.
I like having the residential in here because it gives our builders something that we're looking for our guidance.
Yep.
For new homes, it's probably.
For new homes.
It's handy, yep.
Yeah.
Do you think that they really follow it? I just think about when I built my new home. You go to your lighting selection and they're trying to sell you more lights, not less.
Well, it'll be also difficult to police, so to speak, the light that's casting upwards, right? It's like, I really like this sconce. It looks awesome next to my garage door, and it happens to shoot lighting sources both ways. Well, it looks great, but it's not meeting the ordinance. So in the day, I'm going to get a letter from the city saying I have to take out the light I just put up. Right, it's my need, as a builder, as a homeowner, I need to research all the rules and regulations before I do that, but that's where I kind of agree with Paul a little bit to say the residential against residential isn't, to me, as critical as residential next to industrial or in commercial. But.
And like I noted earlier too, the commercial and industrial standards are very common. Almost every city has regulations regarding that. The single-family residential is more few and far between in terms of regulating it like this is proposed. So at the very least, I guess staff would be hard fast to keep the commercial and industrial language in there if you were to consider an amendment related to the single family.
I can concur with Jeff and Paul that the commercial industrial, that it makes sense. It's where I was a little bit on the fence was the residential and all the, I don't know.
And our nuisance ordinance already has some language in it regarding lighting, correct? Is that what you said in the beginning?
Well, it's vague.
It's
What
So
is
it's well written.
nuisance to you?
it's subjective, and I don't have it off the top of my head, but I believe that it's more so related to glare affecting drivability on roads
Drivability,
adjacent.
okay.
So if you drive by and someone just can visibly see that I'm getting shined by this light, that's would be considered a nuisance.
So a spotlight that your neighbor decides to illuminate his entire backyard on that he just bought, that is blowing up all the other houses in the area with light, the proposed ordinance would help deal with that. But if we took the residential standards out, it would not be able to deal with that, is what you're saying.
I'd have to double check on what the ordinance specifically says, and with direction, we can certainly bring this back in June after what we figured out. And
I think we might have to.
yeah, that's
I kind of is echoing here what Jeff said, but what I don't want to see in the residential is all of a sudden that people are installing fixtures that, are on an hour a night that don't meet the code, and all of a sudden the city is, because what happens when you have an enforcement issue, if you get a few complaints, word spreads faster, and if people feel bitter about it, you're going to have a lot of people upset calling the city, the council members, everybody, and it's just not worth it for that part of the residential side. Now, protecting from the floodlights that are, on residential properties that are maybe a nuisance, that seems like a better route, maybe to tighten up the nuisance code.
It's the security lighting too, right? That only goes off when the dog runs through the backyard, and it shines everybody,
It's bright.
right? Yeah. So in those, you buy a couple bucks, not a couple bucks, but I buy them at any home improvement store and install it yourself, and now there might be an issue that's created at that point. So I don't know. I think the nuisance code should deal with that more than your residential standard lighting code does.
And we can, I was just going to say, we can certainly look into that, and if you wish to table this item, we can look at how can we amend the nuisance code to focus on light trespassing rather than maybe, like you said, those sconces on the wall have a opening on the top of the light that shines upwards, and it's not glaring and it's not an issue, but the way that this would be currently written, they wouldn't be able to have that. So maybe we can refine that nuisance code to really get after the trespassing of light on other properties.
Does our code also address like neighborhood streetlights? So developers come in, put the streetlights on. Depending on the style of those lights, they might be, shining up also. Does this code require? Have we already required in the past that they don't shine up?
No, the way that this code is written, and then just in past examples, it's not something that we've regulated, and because they'd be public street lights eventually when the plat gets done and the road is in, it would be an exempt light from this code.
Even if we're a dark sky community?
Why would that be exempt? Why would the city not comply with the same thing that everybody else has to?
Well, it's not necessarily the downcasting of it, I guess. It's more of you have the right-of-way where these streetlights are, and then right behind it you have the property line. So obviously it's going to be, if you've got a 25-foot or 35-foot,
35-foot
Cobra light, there's a very good chance that a light is going to trespass on that adjacent property. I haven't seen in driving around town that there are lights that upcast that are street lights. But again, that's another thing that we can look into and refine as necessary.
They're more of the decorative lights that, depending on where the casing around the bulb is, sometimes the casing has like an opaque top where it doesn't allow the upcast.
Like you see on Pine View.
Correct. Some of them are just glass all around that would allow for that intrusion. So just something to consider also.
Well,
if
yeah,
we want to do
absolutely.
it.
And I think it may be warranted to call out in here what is exempted on a city street light. Like, in this case, we don't want the city lights to upcast, right?
You know, it's not even just upcast. I mean, those Pineview lights reflect even
Yeah.
off of the, I mean,
Off the pavement, there were
Yes.
too many originally. So.
they're, yes. I mean,
So-
yes.
Jason Quisberg could talk more about
Yeah.
that, but like the Pineview lights are downcasted.
They are.
So, there are other city lights that we have that are upcasted.
But what I was getting at was even the downcast
Can be
can be.
they have
I mean,
glare.
we had one of the neighbors there move because he was an astronomer. He couldn't see the stars anymore. He picked up stakes and moved because of those lights. So they can be a problem even if they're downcast.
I was really happy when my neighbor moved because the new neighbors never have the lights on.
Even, you know, even straight lights that aren't on intersections. I think there should be, you know, questions asked about those kind of lights also. So,
I'm kind of in favor of leaving the residential stuff in here. Maybe it needs to be a little looser, but in here, you know, we were talking the wall sconces is an example. I mean, if we don't want Holiday to put them on or Quick Trip, why would we want our residents to do it?
I think it's more the fact that people are going to do it because they didn't know. And I don't think this is a good example of, well, you should have known the code like you should when you're, you know, building your whole building.
Right.
And that's just going to, I mean, unless it's really serving a purpose and it's that important, different story. But I feel like it has more the ability to upset people than necessary.
I think if we move the residential lighting out of here, what I'm afraid of is you're gonna get someone who said, well, I'm upcasting on trees in my yard and
There's people doing that everywhere. Then.
but
I mean, I can think of houses that are in rural Dayton that do more upcasting than
but
the suburban.
where that
when you drive
becomes a
around.
problem is when you have, I think that where that becomes the problem is, I don't know, it's you know, making sure that it stays within their property is the bigger problem with it.
Just for the direction that we're going, I think the commissioners would like to table this, and then maybe if we come back with some examples of what is in violation and not in violation, based on the
Yeah.
draft ordinance.
And like Peter said, tighten up the residential, or maybe it gets moved to the nuisance code. I don't think it should just get ignored necessarily, but
Okay. So we will need a motion for that.
Make a motion to table.
second.
We have a motion from Crossland and a second from Brown to table. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes 4-0 to table.
Thank you.
All right, notice and announcements.
All right. Right on time. May is Let's Get Moving Month, so just look at all the excitement we have sitting in the chairs here. This is a pedometer. I'm sure that you guys have all seen this in some form or another. This can be given for free or obtained for free outside of City Hall next to the utility billing box. So the city has a challenge to grab one of these and just keep track of how many steps you put in.
You're getting steps right now even.
I know in past years, we've had competitions with other cities. I don't know if we have that. I don't believe we have that currently this year, but, yep. Okay. What else? Spring cleanup day is this Saturday, so if you have, stuff in your garage that you'd like to get rid of, this would be your opportunity. So it's Saturday, May 3rd. 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. at Central Park. For anyone that doesn't know where Central Park is, it's behind, essentially behind the elementary school, on what used to be the gravel parking lot and is now paved.
John, is this on the website?
Yes, this is all on the website, as well as the city's app. So just to push, the city does have an app that you can download on your smartphone that has all of these wondrous announcements here. May 14th, Wednesday, May 14th, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. at the Public Works Garage is our city open house. So we will have all information of how the city works. Every department will have a table, we'll have a zoning map, or maybe you can color your own map in and do a better job than we do. But it's been very well attended in previous years. If you have kids, you can go on tours of, climb around the plow trucks and the fire trucks and all that. And what else? The citywide garage sale will be the weekend of June 5th and 7th, so Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Participants are asked to register their garage sale and why register it. We can put that on the website noting where you are and what you are selling. So I have on here, you can't see, I will be selling gently used planning commission packets.
Nice.
And then also tonight, the council is appointing a committee for L.C. Stevens master plan update. The council and all the commissions are asked to appoint one person to serve on this committee. It is right now a 3-meeting commitment over the spring and the summer. So what I'm looking for from the commission is a volunteer.
To put this in perspective, is there a timeline on when this master plan might get executed, or is it getting executed slowly over multiple years?
Executed, as in?
Constructed?
Constructed.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah, like
long time.
time in little chunks.
Yeah.
Once a year, we'll probably throw something at it, but.
Yep.
Spring, summer's not good for me with coaching my daughter's softball team, so I would have a hard time committing extra nights.
And I don't know if this would be evenings or daytime. So it's really up to the members of the committee of what works for them.
Does anyone have experience with the park commission?
I do, I just don't have time.
Fair enough.
I was gonna say, is there anyone who's interested?
I would have interest, it just schedules can be limiting.
I'm a little concerned about the time, so it's, before I overthink it, Jeff, are you interested?
I mean, I'm interested, but I'm in the same boat as everybody else as far as time commitment without knowing exactly. Spring and summer is busy for me as well, so. When's the new guy start?
How many meetings are anticipated?
3.
3.
John, was there any, like, public resident members? Is this it?
So there's,
6.
I'm going to get the verbiage wrong. The intention is you're going to have this as like a steering committee, and then more of a larger group of public influencers. So, of neighbors and other community members and church groups, school groups. So you're going to have 6 people, and then you'll have a larger influence from 20 or 30 people.
When's that committee get put together?
I don't think it's necessarily a committee. It's going to be, and this is just me thinking out loud of like, I'm representing my special group. Here's my opinion.
Okay.
So, I mean, personally, I appreciate the offer of asking for someone from the planning commission to serve on this. In my opinion, based on where this is located and development nearby, is basically kind of planned out. I don't know that there's necessarily a role for us if we can't make it work. And there's, if there's no desire for someone to make it work, but I'll leave that up to the fellow commissioners. There's one adjacent property that is in its current use that on the river.
guess I'm a little just concerned too I don't know what I can really provide, to be honest. As far as the concepts of designing a park, what should go first, I mean,
I wouldn't be too hung up on, if you.
you just sit and.
You guys don't have the time or not necessarily
do our best
inclination, I don't think it's a
schedule things.
problem not having somebody.
And that's kind of what I was getting at.
Yeah.
If it doesn't work for us, I don't think it's huge, but if
Peter,
you're
I'll offer to
interested,
put my name down, and I'll do what I can to work with our schedules.
I think that's,
Appreciate it.
Yeah, I think it'd be fun. I mean, it's an opportunity to do some actual planning foresight as opposed to
You'd be
just
good at it.
reacting to other people's plans. We get a chance.
Right,
Yeah.
you'd be good. Hopefully it works out with your schedule.
Yeah, I mean, I think if people can be flexible.
and I say that, obviously we've got other parks in our master plan that are more oriented around development. And so this one is more kind of landlocked, and I don't see as big of an impact from a planning commission, what we can offer, to Darren's point. So that was, just to clarify that comment.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Paul.
Yeah.
That is all.
Good night. Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion from Cross and a second from Brown to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. This meeting is adjourned at 9:11 PM.